Spines, or, if you prefer their old name, Books AI. People have said it's a bad idea because it's integrating AI into book publishing, and they've given various reasons why they have a negative perception of the concept. Some have expressed hesitation.
But mass AI publishing, that could strip books of their soul. And that's where I'm stuck. If the AI is truly advanced, then this could further democratize publishing. But if it's not, we risk rushing art into assembly lines. The thing is, I don't have a clear answer. But am I the only one feeling conflicted about this?
Several individuals have pointed out that valuing quantity over quality, as Yehuda Niv, the CEO of Spines, said he wants to publish 8,000 books in 2025 indicates, shows that the company is just after making money quickly while they can. Some have called Spines a group of tech bros. And when questioned about their sales numbers, they were very vague. Vague enough that I wouldn't consider giving them my money to publish my book were I ready to put one on the market. Incidentally, the number is apparently on their PitchBook page, but I don't have an account there as I'm not a venture capitalist or an angel. Neve told the Jerusalem Post's Eve Young that after starting a publishing house out of his dorm room in 2013,
but then I realized that the process is totally broken. Okay. And I assumed I could do it better.
He claims that Neve Publishing, which he admits was not an imaginative name, published 1,200 books each year in Israel, 4 times as many as their best competition. And he says they've had a lot of bestsellers in Israel, where he claims 15% of the book market consists of books published by his company. He's been very clear that he wants to surpass that 15% mark in the US market far more quickly than he did in Israel. What authors, the publishing industry, and even readers want to know, though, is A, what are Spines' best-selling titles? And B, what kind of sales is Spines generating? Even though we can't get exact numbers, it's pretty easy to tell if a book is being read widely based on the number of reviews it has, as well as the kind of reviews. If they're all 5 stars, it's suspicious. Not everyone who reads something is going to love it, even if a majority of the public does. And if it's being widely read, that would mean it's being widely purchased, which, of course, would bode well for authors looking to use Spines' platform. So I went to Amazon and used the advanced search to sort by publisher, so I'd only see titles that Spines has published. Then I sorted by bestsellers. And apparently, the best-selling Spines published book when I did this, 11:43 a.m. on December 5th, 2024, was this one. Yeah. Well. Alrighty then. Gotta start somewhere with this, right? My first thought on the publishing itself is that if this had gone through a traditional publishing house, this would not have been published. HarperCollins, and I have a bone to pick with you asking your nonfiction authors to give their rights to AI scrapers while suing the Internet Archive for being a digital library. Just say no to having and eating. One or the other, not both, and you don't get to have your cake while you eat mine. You aren't Ben Bailey. HarperCollins isn't going to put their name on a book where the person writing it is claiming they are Jesus. Not claiming he's a child of God. Not claiming he's a Christ. But actually saying, as you can see in the subtitle, that he is Jesus. Macmillan isn't going to front that. Penguin isn't going to front that. Simon & Schuster, Hachette, Hyperion, every major publishing house and imprint I can think of would not print this book. Not like this. I mean, if Jeff Bezos decided to publish a book saying he was Jesus, then yeah. Kindle Direct Publishing would publish that, and I guess that's a major publisher now. So, sure. And Elon would just buy one of the major companies, publish the book, and, well, that might be the beginning of a sharp decline in sales. But neither of those blindingly rich individuals have made any such efforts, so, as far as I'm aware, there aren't any major publishing houses who would have published this book. And yet, Spines did. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe one of the CEOs of those major publishing houses would approve this publication on the merits. Maybe they'd think, sure, why not? But I don't think they would, if for no other reason than a lot of people would get very angry over the perception of blasphemy. It's one thing to publish poetry, which is what this book contains, and your thoughts on your own spiritual journey. And people do tend to like reading things like that. It's another thing altogether to publish a book claiming to be Jesus. You might be thinking it's hyperbole. I don't think it is. And there's a few reasons I came to that conclusion. Let's look at the cover. There's a little scroll about a third of the way down on the right here. It says, quote, Resurrection date, September 22nd, 2021, end quote. Resurrection. I don't want to give a lecture on the history of the church and the history of baptism and the history of the debate over the meaning of the word baptismo among scholars who have nothing better to do than debate things that don't generally mean much to the people who aren't in the ivory tower. How many angels can fit on the head of a pin? As many as want to. But if we want to get philosophical about this one, is the suggestion here that the author of the book was baptized, and as he was immersed in the water, Jesus came down from heaven, took his soul up, and then decided to take over his body? Is that what we're saying? I'm asking here. But while we're talking about the cover, there's something else I want to point out here. It's using a picture of the author, retired police officer Marquise Neal, stepping out of a sheriff's patrol car in uniform. I don't... Are they allowed to do that? Setting questions on legality aside, because I know there are regulations about using U.S. military uniforms, and as police precincts become more militarized, I can't help but think that such regulations should also carry over to them. This is why you need a human going over things before approving publication. Are we implying that he's a hero because he's a police officer? That's what the image indicates, but he said he's retired, and his previous book was called Once Hero Turned Coward. That one doesn't appear to have gone through any publishing house. Draft to Digital lists the publisher as Crystal Wilson. And it was written after he retired from the police force, he says. But here, he's saying that he's a spiritual hero. And he's claiming to be Jesus. I don't want to get into nuances of Christian faith here, but I personally never perceived Jesus as God's cop. Back to the cover, though. If this had gone through a human editor, a likely suggestion would have been something that gives a more faith-based impression. This is his poetry about him being Jesus. A bloody cross, like actually a cross with blood, topped by a crown of thorns, would be far more appropriate. Given the little scroll about resurrection, an empty cave with a stone large enough to cover the opening would also be appropriate. A cop getting out of a cop car? Not so much. And where the U.S. flag faded in the background, the road with the tire width impression that runs under the car and falls in the shadow of the second scroll, and the fuzzy-looking bullet casings come in as being about Christ, Christianity, faith, or religion is a bit frightening to think about. Bullets say Christianity to you? Considering Neal's past, maybe that wasn't the road to take on this one. Maybe. It just seems in poor taste. But let's look at that second scroll. It's Ezekiel 37:27. Again, I don't want to get into debates on the interpretations of biblical text. Scholars go over these kinds of things for years, and frankly, I don't have anything to add to that debate at the moment, as it's been a long time since I've read this section in context. However, that's an important aspect here. Context. I have never really liked people taking a single verse or a part of a verse to make their point on something they want to prove with Scripture, because, frankly, it ignores context. In this case, though, Neil is, as I've pointed out, claiming to be Jesus. The verse he's using here is actually God talking. You can actually see that part. It's in the verse. Specifically, this is about David. An interesting choice, given that David was also called a Christ. It's not a surname, people. Being king over Israel. The verses directly preceding and following the one quoted both mention God and his sanctuary in Israel. Isn't it a bit too much hubris to actually claim to be God? I'm not going to psychoanalyze this person. I will not psychoanalyze this person. Moving on to the table of contents. As you can see, it's a list of poem titles, for the most part. Let's look at some of them, shall we? Since this was allegedly edited by Spines AI, I'm going to evaluate it as though it were a human job. They're claiming that they can get the job done quicker using the AI, and the indication is that it will be just as good. They even tout that their AI doesn't make a mistake. No, really, that's what Neve said to Publishers Weekly back in June. Quote, "Our AI can scan everything, never miss a thing, and offer suggestions to correct all spelling mistakes." End quote. The implication of that, of course, is that this author chose to ignore the perfect AI. If I worked in a publishing house, I'd hand this back at first glance and demand to know why all the exclamation points. Readers don't typically like to be screamed at. All caps, like in the title, and constant exclamation points give the impression that you're berating them. Since this is a religious book, I would insist on changing that. If the author was adamant about keeping it, they could find another publisher. Why? Because beating someone over the head with your religion when you're already saying things that many will consider to be sacrilegious is typically not a good tactic to employ to sway anyone to your side. The second thing I notice is chapters 7 and 8. The sample ends at chapter 6, and I'm not going to financially support something I don't philosophically agree with. $10 buys me food, and I'm sorry, but you don't want me buying it only to do a chargeback when I'm done with a review. So, no. But were I an editor looking at this, I would ask if there were a difference between the two, and if so, could we portray that better with more nuanced titling? Keep in mind that while I'm talking about the table of contents, I'm talking about what an editor might ask. A human editor who would have taken a second look at these chapter titles. There are other things I would be concerned about appearing in a religious book, just based on the title. And when you are an editor at a traditional, or what Spines called legacy, publishing house, you are looking at what will help the book sell. If I pick up the book and skim the table of contents, and the first thought in my mind is, "What the?" over the chapter title, I'm putting it back on the shelf, which means the publisher has made a bad call agreeing to publish it. So I'd want the titles of chapters 11 and 12 to change. I'd ask, what exactly do you mean by chapter 14? I'd veto chapters 25, 27, and 30 outright. What is chapter 31? Do you have any idea how many people you will offend with chapter 33? And is this mess from chapters 41 to 44 meant to say excerpt? Let's break that down a bit. Inner glow isn't inherently offensive, nor is black beauty. But what do either of these have to do with religion? I grew up in a religious household, and an emphasis was placed on the fact that God isn't looking at your outsides, but your insides. The parable of the Pharisee was often cited when that Sunday school lesson came around, and it came around at least once a year. So why are these the titles? Why are we putting an emphasis on pigmentation here? Is it important to this particular religious practice? Do we want to publish a book that appears to prefer one level of melanin content over another? To dig beyond that, are we objectifying someone? Are we taking a spiritual journey and making it physical? If this is not the point of the content, then is there a better way to summarize this chapter? Is there something else that could be used for a title to convey the thoughts while not putting an emphasis on skin color? Chapter 14 is titled The Stoic of Being Saved. What? What are we trying to say? Are we comparing Stoicism and Christianity? Is the author saying he was a Stoic and then he was baptized? Is he saying he came to Christianity through Stoicism? Basically, the title is confusing, which is off-putting to readers, especially readers of religious books. Either you're looking for answers or you're looking for affirmation. You aren't looking to be further befuddled. Chapters 25, 27, and 30. Gangsta might not be inherently offensive, but combined with 30, were I an editor for a major publishing house, I would insist on a new chapter title. Just know, you can't imply all black people are gangsters. White people will be up in arms if you make that implication, and it won't matter that it's spelled without the hard R. Spiritual nakedness is problematic for obvious reasons, but that might just be the exclamation point, to be honest. I don't think the idea of being naked in the eyes of the Lord is new or groundbreaking in any fashion, and I don't see it as problematic on its own, as a title. I'd still want an alternate title for the chapter to be considered. I can't even say the title for chapter 30. No, really, I can't. It might not be a hard R, but this would very quickly get the book sent over to an imprint that catered to black audiences, which means it wouldn't get the benefit of the sales machine of the publishing house proper. It wouldn't get the publicity of being showcased on sponsored news segments, or the exasperation of Blake Shelton on Jimmy Kimmel when he was there to promote his content and not do a bit he so obviously hated.
But before we sit down to talk, to chat, and you regale us with stories of your Oklahoma compound and whatnot, we've asked you to accept a challenge. And the challenge is to sing a song with lyrics that you've never seen before until this very night. It's called Wing It and Sing It. Are you ready? All right. It's time to wing it.
I was trying to promote some stuff. Whatever.
We'll promote the stuff, don't worry. It's time to wing it and sing.
Instead, it would be publicized in specialized outlets that cater to the intended audience. Because were I an editor for a major publishing house, I wouldn't want general audiences being aware of the book. I wouldn't want them being offended by it by proxy. I wouldn't want them encouraging boycotts of other publications coming into the market because of the perception of insensitivity, which would be there if that chapter title were in the book and it were marketed to white audiences of a certain age. They tend to be picky about things like that. When they're not on your side, you call them Karens. All right then. Let's look at chapter 31. As far as I can tell, Brushy is a brand name for toothbrushes. Although there seem to be 2 different brands. Regardless, are we saying they've strayed from God in some way? If this is slang that I'm completely unfamiliar with, which is highly likely to be completely honest, chances are that your average I'm not on social media every moment of every day reader isn't going to know what it means either. Coming on the heels of chapter 30's title, it's just another reason to put this back on the shelf. Chapter 33. The reason people would be offended at this is because of the use of God's name. The vowels were removed from the name originally, leaving it as YHWH, simply to prevent saying the Lord's name in vain. Contemporary fundamentalist thought on this is that it doesn't matter if it's the actual name or just how you refer to God. If you say it in vain, then you're committing the sin Scripture speaks against. Again, an editor at a publishing house is looking for sales. Would the inclusion of this chapter title decrease potential sales? Can we rename it? I personally would be asking for alternatives. 41 through 44 all say insert, which is why I'd be asking if the intent was to say excerpt. As in, this is a preview of things to come in the future. And this is what I expect was intended given the summary for this book as it's printed on Amazon. Now let's move on to the content in the sample. Were I an editor in a major publishing house, I'd immediately demand the disclaimer be changed, or I'd refuse to publish the book. I mean, he's claiming to be Jesus right there at the outset. I'm in a bookstore and I see this? I'm snorting, loudly, and placing this right back on the shelf. Possibly with a sticky note over the cover with comedy written on it. Because I wouldn't be sure it wasn't meant to be in the humor section. Turning the page gets us 2 topless photos and a brief sentence about the Jordan River's location. I'd have scratched the, quote, also known as the River Jordan, end quote, because that's just insulting your readers. You're calling them dumb. If you want to sell books, don't call your readers stupid. Unless it's comedy. You can generally get away with it then. Another topless photo graces the next page, alongside a page I assume was intentionally left blank. It's captioned Jordan River Baptism. I don't know why these are on separate pages, but I do know that the picture doesn't actually show a baptism in progress. It does appear to be post-immersion, but the baptism itself is not shown. I'd have asked for another photo. Who did the baptism? Are there other photos from the event? And I would have used the blank page to explain why it was important to do this in the Jordan River. Readers want context. Why was a pilgrimage necessary? Are you advocating that other Christians go on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land in order to be baptized? Because I don't know why I'm looking at a shirtless man, and it isn't exactly what I would have picked this particular title up expecting to find. And then we have our first poem. This is where Spines AI begins to prove it knows nothing about punctuation, assuming it wasn't overridden by a human. It's bad enough that I generally lament the absence of the direct address comma. I won't use the example that I recently saw on Refashioned Hippie's channel here because I know that would offend people given the subject matter. It's linked in the description. Go have a peek if you're curious. But that comma completely changes the meaning of a sentence. As it was once put in live chat on a writing forum, it's the difference between sitting down to dinner and being part of the Donner Party. Let's eat, Grandma, versus let's eat, Grandma. But I don't want you putting the comma in when it doesn't need to be there either. I can't really speak to the formatting, as in the Kindle copy, text size is something I control. I'd have to be holding a physical copy to determine if the AI managed that well. Well, I do question some of the choices on line breaks. But I can say that, once again, this would not have made it past a human editor. Quote, God and I are always near, end quote. Yeah, that's not creepy coming from a human being at all. Quote, as I, the Lamb of God, end quote. Direct claim to be Jesus. Quote, I am the Son of the living God, end quote. If you aren't familiar with Christianity overly much, you might not correlate the capitalization of Son with Jesus, but that is what's meant here, not the simple child of God many refer to themselves as when they claim Christian faith. Quote, I have returned, end quote. Again, claiming to be Jesus. Quote, the cup, which symbolizes my blood, end quote. I'm not sure why my isn't capitalized, given the fact that this is another claim to be Jesus. And I have thoughts on this couplet. I'm not going to voice them. Quote, I am the way, the truth, and God's light, end quote. Direct claim to be Jesus and a misquote of John 14:6. There's more. I'm not covering every bit of it, as I'm not really that interested in writing out the essay about Christianity that addressing them would require. I'm hitting the highlights of what would have kept me from publishing this in its current form were I the human editor overseeing the project, or were I an editor at a traditional publishing house. These proclamations that he believes himself to be Jesus continue in the other poems, including a directive to bow to him at the beginning of chapter 3. I fully understand that I am not the intended audience for this book, but that's kind of the problem, actually. Because Spines is focusing on quantity and not quality, because they aren't looking at the content in a way that evaluates the potential end sales, they aren't giving their clients the best possible advice. Instead, the authors themselves are the customers here. Spines is selling them the dream of having their book published without any of the critique that would make certain it would be at least remotely successful that would come from approaching a major publishing house. Or a very good editor when self-publishing, and they do exist. Spines seems to be advocating for making authors even more of a cog in the machine than they already feel like they are. They're advocating for using a machine to turn out material that won't appeal to a general audience, with little to no quality control. Pumping out material like this, and I remind you that at precisely 11:43 on the morning of December 5th, 2024, this book was the top return when using filters for Spines as the publisher and bestsellers as the order of results, is no different than self-publishing. Interestingly, Spines actually compared themselves to self-publishing by implication back in August of 2024.
self-publishing or traditional publishing? Which one is right for you? With tradition, on the other hand, in self-publishing, although you pay the upfront publishing cost and its initial investment, here you're the boss. You control the entire process, from writing and editing to cover design and pricing. There might be a learning curve at first, but you keep all the profits and the rights to your book. So which one suits you better? The choice is yours.
But he very carefully only implies that Spines might be a self-publishing company. Because Neve clearly indicated that Spines is not self-publishing when he talked to the Jerusalem Post.
So finally, authors have another alternative, a third alternative.
So wait, up until Spines, those were the two options authors had.
Either they will be accepted by the traditional, or they will go to untraditional publisher, or they will do self-publishing. So
okay,
got it. So because the traditional option is unachievable for most of them, their only two options is either untraditional publishing or self-publishing.
A month later, in October 2024, they posted a YouTube video indicating that they are not self-publishing, but rather publishing experts.
Should I self-publish my book or go to a self-publishing company? Do it myself or go to the experts? While you can always do things yourself, when it comes to something complicated and important as publishing a book, especially if your book is important to you, this is almost the same as asking, should I design my own website or hire a web designer? Should I repair my car's engine or take it to the mechanic? Should I cut my own hair or should I go to a hairdresser?
And now he's going to use the phrase self-publishing companies in an effort to differentiate Spines from other self-publishing companies.
Self-publishing companies, depending which of course, offer professional editing, cover design, formatting, and some also offer marketing. These services, and more importantly, the experts behind them, ensure your book looks polished and professional, which is crucial for standing out in the market. Good self-publishing companies don't only save you time, they bring in expertise such as knowing the industry standards and best practices, which can make all the difference between a book that sells and one that doesn't. Should I self-publish?
If you don't want to go through a traditional publisher, that's your choice. People at those publishing houses have jobs intended to make sure that you have the best possible chance of being successful. They're harsh in their criticisms because it's their job to know what audiences will tolerate. And by and large, Christians aren't going to tolerate someone who was baptized in 2021 telling them that they're Jesus. Spines isn't doing this man any favors. Even with this book being their highest seller at the moment I did the search. It is a dynamic list, updating as sales are processed, so I have no idea how long it was even there. It's not listed in any categories as a bestseller, and it has no reviews. It doesn't even have ratings. Regardless of what you think of the content personally, the fact is that a human editor would have caught this and would not have approved it in this form. Though I can't help but acknowledge the irony in an Israeli entrepreneur, as Neve is described by Publishers Weekly, publishing this book. It's certainly not what I would expect. Spines will need to drastically improve their AI, or an author's ability to override it, if they want to compete with publishing houses in the way they claim they intend. Sure. They told The Guardian that the editing is done by a human if someone wants to pay for editing. The tiny looping video on Spines' website appears to show differently, but what do I know? I mean, obviously, rewrite isn't the same as edit my work, but that's actually exactly what it seems the AI is doing, including using the tone of famous authors. When you select Rewrite from the sidebar, it gives you a drop-down to choose a genre, then offers 3 options: same length, shorter, or longer. Oddly, despite giving a visual example for all of the other options on the sidebar, Spines doesn't show you what this would look like. just that it exists. That feels sketchy, to be sure. It also indicates that the intent is to have a complete AI editor and not just one that stylizes expression to make you sound like Jane Austen, but that it doesn't work. Yet. And in the interview Neve gave to the Jerusalem Post, he said that everything is done by their algorithms. They scan the manuscript, then the algorithms decide what it's about. I really want to know what those algorithms decided Neil's book was about, which is then used to choose categories on Amazon. He did state later in the interview that the AI is not able to provide the type of feedback a human reader can, yet, unless it's within 16 pages. That's the range within which the AI can catch inconsistencies. And Neve also wants to introduce a writing aid that will enhance an author's writing, just sounding more and more like it's just AI writing the book, though he compared this tool to a calculator used by a mathematician. On Spines' page about AI publishing platforms, there's a statement that AI can, quote, enhance readability and engagement, end quote, but also a note that a, quote, final review by a human editor is essential for quality assurance, end quote. It seems like, from that, the intent is to integrate AI editing into the process while still charging for a human read-through at the end. Though, it's a little odd that their human has an AI symbol behind them in that Paramount pricing plan on the line that says professional proofreading. Psst, Neve. You might want to have your tool for enhancing readability have a look at your website. Right here. And to be honest, I'm not sure Spines wants to compete like they claim. Unlike legacy publishers, their intended customer isn't the reader. Their intended customer is the author. And they got the money here, which Neil may or may not be able to recover from sales. I would not want to hazard a guess. But I can tell you that Spines' upward price tag of $5,496 US, when not on discount, which doesn't include expert proof listening or illustrations, isn't that much different from the average prices of self-publishing. So what are you really getting from them? From what I'm reading in the articles on the costs of self-publishing, it's all the low end of the equation. I would also want to be assured that this expert proof listening meant a human listen to the whole book, and not just the part that the AI algorithm indicated that the AI reader mispronounced. Because according to Neve's interview with the Jerusalem Post, that's what happens.
Okay, so instead of the process of creating an audiobook takes a week's time of a process, and instead of the proof hearing takes, let's say, you created 10 hours of an audiobook, you would need to have a human being doing the proof hearing because there are few words that the AI misgenerated, so you have to fix that manually. What we do, we have an algorithm that can predict where in that 10 hours of an audiobook probably the AI misgenerated something, and that's the only things the human being has to hear and fix.
Wow.
If I'm paying extra, and it is extra, I want to get what I'm paying for. Folks are paying $600 US to have a human listen to their book. But all it seems they're actually getting is a few minutes parsed out by the algorithm of the most likely place the AI screwed up. And that's supposed to be a fair price? And if this is their AI's idea of a good mixing volume, I shudder to think what would happen if you paid for music in your audiobook.
especially in writing. So make your first book more about discovery, finding your voice, learning the ropes, and understanding your audience. Each page you write, every character you create, and every plot twist you unravel teaches you something crucial. And yes, there will be...
Jin Suk-Fong Lee brought up an excellent point on CBC's Commotion broadcast on December 2nd, 2024.
But I do wonder, what are they going to publish? Because I also used to be a bookseller, and I used to run the special orders desk. And every so often somebody would come by and say, hey, I want to order this book. And it would be something like How to Build a Bomb. And we'd say, no, we should not order that in. And so I'm wondering with Spines, where is that accountability? Who is going to say, no, you can't publish this thing that is horribly graphically violent. You can't publish this thing that's like a conspiracy theory. You can't. No one's going to say no, I assume. I don't know. Maybe there is going to be someone who's going to say no.
Well, I mean, this...
It's not an unfounded concern. To that point, Spines does say in their terms of service that they reserve the right not to publish or distribute things that are submitted to them via the platform and can remove the content at any time. Nathan Maharaj did address that in the Commotion broadcast.
So this morning I had a look at their terms. So to address Jen's concerns, yes, they've covered their posteriors pretty effectively with some terms about that they won't publish things that are illegal or what have you. But setting aside how they might filter out the content, the fact is, I think Jen's got it right on the nose that they're paid before anything comes to market. If no books were published, Spines is getting paid. That's a business model that tells you a lot, and it tells you that readers aren't the focus, which is fine. The book publishing world is a long value chain full of people who don't need to be 100% focused on readers. There's other jobs to do, but we should not get confused here that Spines doesn't seem to need to be thinking too much about readers when they're thinking about facilitating authors maybe who submitted a manuscript to somebody like Jen and the answer was no. So if they put some money behind it, they can get to yes, because.
But just because they can refuse doesn't mean that a human is actually reviewing the content before it becomes problematic. If nothing else, there's the fact that safety by design principles had to be established in an attempt to stop CSAM being generated by AI. There are a plethora of completely AI-generated books on Amazon, including lots with AI-generated nudes. I will not be showing you those. To be fair, Amazon committed to the standards. But I'm not sure that Spines is committed to this agreement. Please don't be naive enough to think that people wouldn't give their credit card to Spines and then try to publish that type of content. If you've noticed anything about Spill the Tea channels on YouTube, you've noticed that people, more and more, out themselves for committing crimes in real time. The infinite money glitch comes to mind. Or there's Ramzi Khalid Ismail. Curiously, Spines stated it published 273 titles in September 2024. But a search on Amazon for Spines titles published during that month only shows 114 titles. Were the other 159 not distributed on what Spines itself calls, quote, the largest online retailer, end quote? I guess this falls under the section on their How Does Spines Publishing Platform Work page that says like Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but maybe not necessarily them? Though I am admittedly curious as to what countless means. According to Israel 21C, it means 100 plus channels. But wait. The membership plans that are part of your purchase agreement with Spines say that all books published to Amazon. It's in the basic plan, what they call essential. You only get Books A Million in Barnes & Noble and Ingram if you upgrade, with unnamed, quote, dozens of other booksellers, end quote. So, where are the other 159 books that Spines says it published in September 2024? According to CCN, the whole point of Spines was to automate book distribution through, quote, every possible channel and platform, end quote. So why aren't those books on Amazon? Also, Spines claims that, quote, more than 500 titles, end quote, were published in 2023. There are only 8 titles on Amazon showing as published by Spines in 2023, with 257 showing under Books AI. That leaves at least 235 unaccounted for. Of course, if you use the number given to Valiant CEO and CTech, 400, that's only 135 that appear to be missing. Still, that's more than 25%. In his September 2024 interview with the Jerusalem Post, Neve claimed that Spines published 235 titles in August 2024. His actual words were last month, so we'll look at both July and August. July 2024 only shows 89 titles on Amazon. Likewise, August 2024 only shows 89 titles. Whichever month he meant, that's 146 titles unaccounted for. Are we to assume that all of these books were removed from Amazon's catalog? If we do, that's a very high removal rate for what I can only assume would be terms of service violations, which makes Ms. Lee's prior point that much more relevant. Or is the answer here something much simpler? That these books aren't available to US users? Meaning they aren't listed on US Amazon at all. That would be very odd, since Spines told SiliconANGLE in April 2024 that it only supported books in the English language. The list of titles published by them in September 2024 provides filters for English, French, and Spanish, so obviously it allows more languages than it did in April, but that doesn't explain why books that would have been in English by statements from Spines published in 2023 aren't showing up. Of course, another option is that the Spines AI that's supposed to optimize SEO for the XML file that's uploaded alongside the book into Amazon's search engine failed at its job.
How to do that? We also optimize the metadata. Metadata, it's an XML file that is uploaded to the channels with the book, and that's like an SEO advertising for a book, because if you don't optimize the metadata properly, the author himself will never find his book on Amazon.
And he's very clear. The AI does this part. Only the AI, from what I understood him to say. Yet there is another possibility, as revealed by their listing on the Better Business Bureau under the name Books Publishing Technologies US Incorporated. It is possible that Spines' computer says that it published the book, but that the distribution channel, as Spines refers to Amazon and other vendors, did not approve the book. Likewise, it is possible that the author requested removal of the book, as one of their customers did in July of 2024. Interestingly, it's also revealed here that Spines charges for reviews of the published works. I mean, it was obvious there were fake reviews on some of their listings. But the open admission here that they charge for them, and at $400 a pop? Well, I guess that answers some things. Reviewing their own terms provides another potential answer. The material published using Spines' system was removed due to a violation of those terms. Whatever the case, I feel like this needs to be presented more clearly when the company is touting its numbers to the media. Because anyone reading those articles and not looking into this any deeper, and anyone not using the advanced search option available on Amazon, might simply believe the reports the media is providing about the number of published titles. And the media's source for those numbers seems to just be Spines, and not a verification of title availability through Amazon, the one platform to which it claims to universally publish. Also, it's disingenuous of any news outlet to say that Spines published its first title this year.
Nathan, I mean, look, this startup has been around since 2021, but they've only been publishing books for like this year. So what's the kind of stuff that they're publishing?
While technically correct, you can't use the 2021 incorporation date, 2020 per Israel's check ID, and not acknowledge the previous name they published under. As I said in the opening, that was Books AI, and their oldest title on Amazon, filtered for publisher and to show in order of publication date, is this one, published on April 7th, 2021. If, as a reporter for a major media outlet, you didn't know about the previous name, I'm going to question your research skills. Especially since a look at their own blog shows you the date of the name change. Although, I will say that it feels particularly gross, okay? I can't say it doesn't feel gross because it does. To see the From the Publisher section on the book page filled with a graphic that advertises the publisher and not the book. I'm not going to get into the veracity question of that claim either. Media bias aside, an internal publication number means nothing to authors who are evaluating whether to use the service in order to publish their book, Mr. Neve. If these authors whose books aren't showing on Amazon have stopped using your service, and you've abided by Clause 11 of your terms contract, and subsequently removed distribution of those books as a result, it still looks shady for you to say you published 235 titles in either July or August 2024, when only 89 titles are showing up on Amazon. Being in business, you should already know that optics are very important to your brand. Back in June 2024, Spines told Publishers Weekly that authors get, quote, up to, end quote, 70% of the royalties from book sales. But since their Series A funding was announced, they're claiming that writers keep 100% of royalties. That's what they told the bookseller, and what was printed in The Guardian, The Week, and The Arabian Post, anyway. Yet, a week before the bookseller article, still after the Series A funding, Spines told TechCrunch that the royalties are split. This time the numbers say exactly 70% for the authors and exactly 30% for Spines. These were the same numbers provided to SiliconANGLE back in April 2024. So which is it? According to their main page, quote, earn 100% of all sales royalties, easily tracked and withdrawn every 30 days, end quote. But the terms of service tells a different story. Quote, subject to your payment of the applicable subscription plan fees, you are entitled to receive 70% of the net sales royalties, end quote. It goes on to say, quote, the term net sales royalties means gross revenue received by Spines less any applicable taxes, end quote. But be careful, it continues, quote, you are permitted to make payment withdrawals any time during the term and for 90 days thereafter, after which you irrevocably waive your right hereunder to receive payment of the applicable royalties, end quote. God help you if you have a catastrophic event that lands you in a coma. But Amazon KDP charges authors 30% of their royalties if the ebook costs between $2.99 US and $9.99 US, and 65% if your book is outside that range. Spines even printed that on their own blog. It seems a bit underhanded to baldly state on your main page to authors that they keep all of their royalties, when simply by virtue of publishing through the one retailer Spines guarantees on all package options means that writers aren't going to see 100%. Ever. That feels predatory, to be honest. Because the statements to the media outlets and the statements in the pages on the website that people are most likely to flock to in order to get information mention the 100% royalties. As Spines is targeting first-time authors, those who have not previously self-published and aren't sure where to start, it would appear, this seems a bit dodgy. And on top of that 30% from your net royalties, you're paying them for that membership. And if you stop paying for it, they take your book off of all the markets they submitted it to. This is really leaving a bad taste. Sidebar for a moment, if you will. Spines has a clause allowing use of the service with the approval of a parent or guardian for individuals aged 13 to under 18. I didn't feel good about this when it seemed like you were taking advantage of adults. I feel even less comfortable with this now. Also, since I'm about to talk about IP ownership, hey, DC? Marvel? Lazy-ass AI images in that article. The text, y'all. Ugh. To the bookseller, Spines said that the authors keep the rights to their works. That Spines doesn't take any like a vanity publisher would do. TechCrunch describes Spines as not being transparent with how an author's intellectual property is handled in the long term. So, does Spines reserve some rights? Are the rights they reserve ones that would be expected, like using testimonials on their website that include your book cover and a summary from your work? Possibly an excerpt? Or is it something more? Are authors' works used to train Spines' LLM AI for proofreading and editing purposes? Given Neve's statement to the Jerusalem Post about the algorithm they did write themselves to determine formatting in documents that indicated the difference between title, subtitle, chapter title, and paragraphing, it sounds like that's the case.
Now you need to find a way for the algorithms to understand what is a title, what is a paragraph. So we looked for things that already existed and we couldn't find any of them. Okay,
wow.
So we have to create our own algorithms, because before that, actually we had a human that going and
it's just looking through the whole book to tag that.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we poured that into the rule-based system we created about how a book should look like. Okay. So we had to create all the process of tagging the book, and the way we did that is because I have a lot of data of books. I could train the model about this is how it looks before tagging and this is how it looks after tagging.
So you had a ton of books to give your model to train it. That's perfect. Coming from like publishing to AI publishing.
So for us, it was a very, very at first challenging, but then realized, okay, we come for over a decade of operations in the publishing domain. We have access to huge amount of data. Okay, so we use that to create the models.
Amazing.
So this is how you solve challenges in
training AI models.
Yes, you have to somehow gain access to large amount of data.
If so, I'd point them back to the issue of an author overriding a suggestion from the AI to keep what is technically not correct grammar or syntax. what could actually prove to be detrimental formatting for poetry or for books involving a heavy amount of illustrations or other images. Yet it's actually worse than this. Spines Terms of Service say that you have the rights to what's in your books. That's true. But Spines owns what is created using their platform. They own the digital copies of your books and can use them as they see fit. You don't even get a digital certificate saying you got the books you wrote that were formatted using their platform unless you agree to pay for their Paramount plan. And only then are you allowed to use the materials that were created via Spines AI in order to make derivative works of your own writing. An example. You can't use a book cover made using Spines platform in a promo for your movie based on your book. Nor can you use the files you paid Spines to create to sell your book on a different platform than they've listed it on for you. I'll be honest, this is giving me serious Kindle Worlds contract vibes. Because Spines sure made certain that they were covered for making derivatives of your work. Oh, they might say now that it's limited to distribution, marketing, and creating an audiobook if you pay for that, but it's not limited in any way in that contract. That puts read rights comments about authorization and compensation when AI uses copyrighted material in a different light. And as Neve told the Jerusalem Post, they make 70 different versions of your work when you submit it. 70 versions that they keep, that you don't own any rights to.
Of the book, we generate over 70 versions of the formatted version of the book. And we can also,
where does the free manuscript evaluation submission fall under all of this legalese? You're using the platform, technically, even if you haven't agreed to payment. So is it something that they then consider their property? I don't trust their pop-up statements in light of the fact that their front page says authors keep 100% of all royalties, and their terms of service directly and explicitly contradicts that. But having the rights to publish your work doesn't help with marketing and distribution. And according to TechCrunch, Spines is charging monthly fees for distribution to the various retail outlets like Barnes & Noble and Amazon and Apple Books. And amazingly, they are recommending that individuals using their platform also use Smashwords and Draft2Digital. Smashwords' website says they and Draft2Digital are one company now. Draft2Digital tells you they take 10% of your sales. Oh, yes, to clarify, that price you see on Spines' pricing page includes a membership plan. You pay them for their tips on marketing and for distribution on either a monthly or yearly basis. But know that if you choose the monthly option, there's a surcharge for not paying all at once. And these charges have changed significantly from 5 months ago. You pay them for metadata optimization and for hosting a page made specifically for your book for you. If you're on the cheap plan, you only get email support. Middle gets you phone support up to 4 times a month, and Paramount gets you flexible phone support. So, is Spines charging a fee for membership, which is supposed to include distribution, and then recommending that you pay Draft2Digital a percentage of your royalties for greater distribution, in addition to what you're already paying to Spines? Yes, according to their blog post from January 17th, 2024, they are indeed. Though I'm not sure how I feel about taking marketing advice from a website that, in 2024, is advising you to start a blog and is duplicating the advice immediately after first providing it. Of course, they seem to like to duplicate content to get more traction for it. I do have a question, though. Why is Spines working so hard to send its customer base over to draft to digital? D2D does a bit of what Spines charges for free. You get formatting, distribution, and sales data without a charge from D2D. They convert your file from the format on your computer to a format that can be read via e-reader, EPUB, for free. PDFs are okay for books that you want to print, but D2D won't take them for electronic copies. D2D tells you up front the 16 stores that they help you to publish to, though you choose how many and which ones for ebooks, and when you make a sale is when they make money. And bonus! D2D sends you a monthly payment once you've met the minimum required transfer amount for the payment platform you want to get paid on. They send it to you, not make you come onto their platform to withdraw funds and tell you that they're going to keep your money if you don't withdraw it within 90 days. D2D gives you an ISBN for free, and while they're listed on the ISBN if it's scanned, they aren't claiming any rights to your work. What's more, D2D isn't claiming any ownership of the digital files created using their system. You own the files, and, per D2D, you can use them however you want. Unlike Spines, D2D lets you use print on demand and ebook services separately of each other. You don't have to get a print book in order to get an electronic book, and vice versa. With Spines, as you saw, you're locked into that physical book regardless. I'm not trying to turn this into an ad for Draft to Digital. This video isn't sponsored by anyone at all. But I am curious as to why Spines would be sending its customers over to D2D so readily. Is their goal not to build any kind of publishing company at all, but instead to build a database of human content that, per contract, they own the rights to and can provide to AI companies to train their language models? Does Neve have a second client list for a part of this business model that's not being advertised? It's not like Meta didn't float the idea of outright buying Simon & Schuster in order to train its AI. Taylor and Francis and Wiley have both already entered into agreements licensing their content, and De Gruyter has said they intend to make such agreements, with Cambridge University Press letting authors opt in. The idea that you can get people to pay you to use their content to train your AI has to appeal to corporations. I am not saying that this is definitively occurring. I am questioning possibilities. So many questions, and they only grow the more I learn about Spines. There's another thing that I'm confused about with respect to Spines. They told TechCrunch that they don't have literary agents, that they have, quote, customer success agents, end quote, who are, quote, trained on average for about a month on the ins and outs of publishing with Spines, end quote. Why then is there a page on Spines' website dedicated to listing literary agents? It's actually in the URL. Do these agents know they're listed on Spines' site? Do they know Spines seems to have created individual, though blank, pages for them on the site, which gives an impression that they support Spines' AI approach? Because that's really interesting, given what Ms. Lee had to say on Commotion.
Because one of the things that is a very hot topic in sort of contract negotiations with an author and maybe an author and an agent is AI. And one of the things that a lot of publishers are doing, that a lot of agents are doing, is rewriting those contracts to make sure that AI There's clauses that AI has not been used in the writing of the book, that AI will not be used in the design or production of the book, and various other AI clauses, including something like we won't sell your book to train AI on the publisher's end. So I find this very fascinating that HarperCollins even tried, because anytime I've been in a contract negotiation with an agent and an author in the last 2 years, that AI clause has always been requested. So I don't know.
There are 663 agents listed, and Spines recommends you not look for one until, quote, after the publishing stage to maximize your book's potential and opportunities, end quote. This is after they've told you that agents can help you navigate contracts, which, by using Spines, you would have signed one doozy of a contract, even if you didn't know it. And speaking of iffy things Neve told TechCrunch, quote, this is an American company, not an Israeli one. It's a different approach, end quote. Well, that's odd, because according to the pages I can find online, this is an Israeli company. And Israel's Check ID says it was incorporated in 2020. Florida Company Registry and Bizopedia also show it as a foreign profit corporation. It does have a U.S. name it operates under that's slightly different. That's interesting. Even so, it's the foreign profit corporation that's listed on their terms of service, so that's who you're actually doing business with, I think. I comprehend that people don't really know what goes into publishing, and they don't understand all the nuances, and they don't generally feel that the creative control they might have to give up to a legacy publishing house is fair. I will point you back to my earlier statements. Big box publishing houses are focused on book sales. For them, it's an investment into the book, the product of the author's mind, time, and research, of the artist's skills in creating a fitting cover, of the editor's skills in proofreading, of the layout designer's skills in formatting. And that's not even a comprehensive list of all the people and skills involved in creating a book that goes on to sell well. Your royalties are less because they front the costs in the beginning. Spines told TechCrunch that the information on which third-party services they use, because they admitted they aren't building it themselves, is the, quote, secret sauce, end quote, of their platform. Sophie Jarvis at Spines gives us a clue, though, on their page on AI publishing platforms. Incidentally, how do you determine your reading times? Every article on your website only takes 1 minute to read according to you, except the ones that take 0 minutes. But Sophie's article alone is over 8 minutes per wordcounter.net. When AI corrects AI. Note: between the time that I took screen captures and the uploading of this video, Spine has corrected this issue on their website. Please read their privacy policy if you're going to go traipsing through their pages. Also, Neve, you're welcome. They list the leading platforms as Grammarly, Adobe InDesign, Canva, OpenAI's GPT-4, and Crayon. And then, showing their humble nature, they list themselves. Further down the page, they go on to list Pro Writing Aid, DALL-E, and 11labs.io. They then call themselves a, quote, comprehensive publishing solution, end quote. Spine's representative presented self-publishing to The Guardian as requiring the author to be an expert in every part of publishing. Neve himself gave this impression in his interview with the Jerusalem Post, where he called hybrid publishers untraditional. The idea that you need to know everything about publishing for self-publishing is simply not true. You can hire an artist for your cover. Children's book authors hire illustrators all the time. If you're not sure where to start, you can always pop over to Readsy, or even just type book cover illustrator into a search engine. And while Neve did acknowledge that, he also presented self-publishing as a Herculean task that is virtually unsurmountable.
Either they will go and figure out self-publishing. That means they became their own publisher. Now they have to hire service providers, an editor, a graphic designer, an Amazon expert, and they have to integrate between them all. They have to manage them, and
they have to sell their book to pay everyone for doing that.
Probably they will never gain back their investment of money, of time and money. It will cost them tens of thousands of dollars, and it will take them 6 to 18 months. And we manage the royalties for the author. So instead of the author figuring out all the collection, having to send the W-9 for all the platform, like all this headache, we take care of that.
Wow.
Every month you're receiving his royalty reports, you know how much money is owed.
Though I freely acknowledge that the idea can seem daunting. You don't need to be an expert in marketing, no, but you should read up on some marketing strategies, sure. It's like anything else in life. If you want information, you do research. There's a free book on Amazon Kindle right now that gives some strategies for gaining readers. It's called Reader Magnets. Another thing I would suggest to get ideas is signing up for the mailing list of authors you actually like. See how they do things. It might not work for whatever genre you're writing in, but it's a place to start getting ideas. And find out where your favorite authors hang out. Join their groups on Discord or Facebook or wherever. Be a part of their community. You can see what other readers are saying inside those groups as well as author responses. In the end, what I know is that legacy publishers focus on the amount of sales of a book to a reader, and they want to see you succeed if for no other reason than a profitable return on their investment. Vanity publishers focus on selling their service to the author. Once they've got your money, they're not that interested in you or your book. Spines also focuses on selling its services to the author. I'm not saying that the transitive property applies here. It's just an interesting correlation.